Good morning, afternoon, whatever time it is, day where you're at. It's afternoon here, so if it's the same time, it'd be good afternoon. We are going to be working more on a little bit on integers, but not just integers. We're focusing more on positives and negatives. If you remember in this last part of was it integers part 2 or whatever, we were doing some stuff with multiplying, and we know that a positive times a positive is a positive. It's the first type of multiplying we do, and that a negative times a negative is also positive. So if the signs are the same, then it's a positive, same, positive. If the signs are not the same or different, then it is a negative. So negative times a positive is also a negative. Same, positive, different, negative. These rules are true for both multiplying and dividing. Dividing is actually just sort of a different way of looking at multiplying. Next up, we're going to also look at another part of multiplication that sometimes confuses people, but is really not hard at all. So let's say we have 2, and right now I'm going to use this little dot times 3 times 1. That's one way of writing multiplication rather than the little star thing. There's also parentheses. When we do anything in math, really, we take it one step at a time. We only do one thing at one time. We can't just, the 2's not doing a whole bunch of stuff. It's just multiplying right now. So it would be 2 times 3, which is 6, times 1, and 6 times 1 is 6. So see how I did 2 times 3, and then that number times 1, or I mean the order doesn't really matter. So if I had like 4 times 5 times 2, 4 times 5 is 20, and 20 times 2 is 40. This is a good way to see some of the other properties of multiplication where the order doesn't really matter as long as we do it one step at a time. We could also say 2 times 5 is 10, and 10 times 4 is 40, or 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 times 5 is 40, and organize it how we best want. So we're going to take things one step at a time. Alright, what does this have to do with our positives and negatives? Now let's say I had like, I don't know, negative 1 times negative 1, negative 1 times negative 1. That's just positive 1. We said negative times a negative is a negative. Right? What about negative 1 times negative 1, make that times a little bit bigger, times another negative 1. Oops, forgot a little time sign there. Negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Positive times a negative is a negative, negative 1. See that? Pretty easy, right? These two turned into a positive. Positive times negative, because it's different, is negative. Let's try negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 times, you guessed it, we're going to add a fourth one. So here we had 2, here we had 3, here we have 4. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. I'm going to go ahead and do this multiplication over here now too. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Notice how when we split it up in pairs like that, all the pairs of negatives end up positive, and a positive times a positive is the easiest one. It's just a positive, right? So if we have 2, we get a positive. If we have 3 of them, we get a negative. If we have 4 of them, we get a positive. And I don't want to write all these out, so I'm going to do this form. This 5 means negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 times 5 times, which would end up being a negative. So if we have an odd, it's positive. Odd. Oh, no. That is not an odd number at all. That is quite the, what's the term for that? Antithesis of odd. Let's try that again. Let's call that an even number. An even number of them is positive. If we have an odd number, negative. Here is even. Here it's odd. So what this says is let's say we have -1 to the 50th. Well, 1 times itself a bazillion times is still going to be 1. The question is it odd, is it positive or negative? Well, it will happen an even number of times, so all those little negatives will pair up and become positive, so +1. -1 to the 27th, we know it's still going to be 1, whether it's going to be positive or negative. That it just kind of keeps flipping back and forth, doesn't it? Well, this time we'll have 26 is an even number beforehand, so we'll have that many pairs, or 13 pairs, and 1 more left over, so this is going to be negative. So we have, like I said, an even number of positives and negatives, or even number of negatives in our multiplication division, then it's positive. An odd number is negative. That way, if you're looking at, they got various problems out there where they go, we might clear out a little bit more stuff, just cause. Let's say you have like -2 times -3 times -4 times 2. Well, I already said do it one at a time. Now, positive and negatives are some of the trickiest things in the world, and one of the best things you can do is take care of it right away. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. I got 3 negatives being multiplied, so my answer is negative. Then we would say 2 times 3 is 6, times 4 times 2 is 8, 6 times 8, if you saw it on your times tables, is 48. So it would be -48. See how I took care of the negative right away and didn't have to worry about it? Or -3 times -3 times -2 times -2 equals. Question is it positive or negative? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 even. So it's going to be, yay, positive. So we'll call it positive. 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 2 is 18, 18 times 2 is, what was that, 36. Like I said, the ordering can really help, because that's some tricky multiplication. You could have done 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 6 is also 36. I hope this has been valuable and kind of interesting. I always thought it was. It made class a lot less boring, and that you get something out of it, and looking forward to our next lesson.